Kaya na, alam ko, hinahanap niya ako kahapon sa fast talk ni Senator Manny Pacquiao Pacman, no? At yun, nakita natin talaga doon sa fast talk niya, na-criticize na yung dalawang kandidato. Ano yung sinabi niya kay ISKO at saka kay BBM na ang issue niya, corruption daw. Yung kay ISKO, I was a bit surprised kasi, di ba, medyo chummy-chums sila. At some point, there were even discussions of ISKO and Pacquiao potentially teaming up, no? As the unity team of the opposition, no? At ngayon, medyo ganon. I don't know kasi pre-recorded yata yan. So, I don't know if Pacquiao knows about yung sinabi ni Lenny sa kanya, di ba? So, but, tignan nyo. Ang ganda ng sinabi niya kay Ma'am Lenny, ang ganda ng sinabi niya kay Lacson, ang ganda ng sinabi niya dun sa ibang candidates, in a sense na wala siyang sinabing masama, right? So, actually, if you look at the fast talk, ang pinaka yung medyo talagang nagkamehameha comments ay si Lenny talaga. Na-criticize niya lahat eh. Pero yung iba, medyo selective. So si ISKO, na-criticize na yung both BBM and Lenny. And then in the case of Pacquiao, na-criticize niya si ISKO and BBM kasi daw may bahit na concern about corruption or something like that, no? So that was a bit surprising for me, no? Lalo yung kay ISKO kasi yun nga medyo chummy sila before, so I don't know where that came from. Now, alam ko kahapon pa yan at marami pa nangyari. Sorry, ang dami kong kailangan gawin. May day job po tayo, may kailangan tayo isulat, may hinabol pa ako ibang trabaho. And usually, I try to take a little bit break here, a day off, a week. So kahapon sabi ko, sige, iwan na lang natin yan for Saturday kasi back to work mode na naman tayo. So today, pag-usapan natin yung Pacquiao. No? Ayan, may notes na ako this time kasi hindi na, medyo may time lag na. Puntahan natin yung mga key points, no? Para lang ma-prove ko sa inyo talaga, I take down notes, no? Anyways, it's here, but just to make sure na I'm clear with some of the quotes na I got from him. Una-una, let me say this. Natuwa po ako dun sa kita nyo, medyo muscle shirt din ang style ko ngayon kasi si Pacquiao medyo mga fit muscle shirt din ang suit niya. Bagay naman kay Senator Pacquiao. Ito una-una, sobrang gusto ko yung sagot niya sa West Philippine Sea. As in, super. Sa tingin ko, to be honest, feel ko siya yung best answer as far as West Philippine Sea is concerned. Not necessarily in a policy-oriented way, but in terms of yung predisposition. Napaka-ganda po yung sagot ni Manny Pacman. Siya lang yatang alam ko na sumagot na kaya natin yan. Sige, even defensive war, even if mali talaga yung framing ng question, who's talking about the war? Kasi hindi naman talaga gerang issue dito. Even China doesn't want war. Once magkaroon ng war, di lahat ng ibang countries pupunta na sila sa US kasi matakot sila sa China. Etong China pala, bully. But anyways, ang sabi ni Pacquiao, kaya natin to! Kaya natin to! He kept on saying, kaya natin yan! And they need to see na firm tayo, no? Dapat makita nila na firm tayo, na we're firm too, no? Basta firm ka. He keeps on mentioning that. Yan ang fighter. Yan ang fighter. Yan ang patriotic na kandidato. Yan ang patriotic na leader. Dapat ganyan po ang stance. Kaya natin, hindi yung hindi natin kaya, defeatist and all. Nakakaya po yan. No self-respecting leader will have a leader na sasabihin, hindi natin kaya ibang bansa, talo na tayo kagad. Ganun. Of course, ano kaya na. But, in fairness naman kay Pacquiao, hindi naman siya warmonger na taragiray natin ng China. Sabi niya, but at the end of the day, of course, you have to have dialogue and you cannot resolve it in one round. You have to go through multiple rounds. Ito rin sinabi niya, nung minention, hindi po PCA. Arbitral Tribunal, Special Arbitral Tribunal under Article 287, Annex 7. Nung tinanong kay Pacquiao, kamusta po yung issue ng arbitration? Ito yung sinabi niya, we won't give up on that. Yun pong sinabi ni Pacquiao, no? Sorry, yung iba kasi translate ko sa English para magamit ko sa mga articles and analysis ko. Actually, tomorrow with East Asia Forum, Monday pala, with Australian National University, may lalabas silang article sa akin, analyzing foreign policy in a different candidate. So, more or less, my analysis, I think, holds, no? Although, medyo nasulat ko na mas maaga. So, ito, at ito pa yung sinabi niya, no? Sabi niya, speaking about China, no? Na, hindi ko alam kung sinasabi, biro niya or half biro, sabi niya, na sinasabi na probinsya daw tayo ng China. This is when Tito Boy was discussing the veracity or lack thereof of yung China's historic rights claim na kwento-kwento as opposed to on-clause at yung ating arbitration award, which is in consonance with international law. Sabi niya, ito yung sabi ni Pacquiao, oo nga sinasabi nga nila na probinsya pa tayo ng China no? So parang, tignan mo, di ba? So you can see yung Pinoy pride, yung fighter spirit ni Pacquiao. In fairness sa kanya, that is the kind of answer we want to hear from our leaders. Hindi yung, ay, wala tayong magagawa, ay, talo tayo, hindi yung hindi pa nga alam ano yung difference ng ICJ sa ICC, nako po, hindi alam yung difference ng PCA sa Arbitral Tribunal Award, hindi alam yung difference ng with allianza, or without allianza. In fairness kay Pacquiao, clear siya doon sa kanyang red line. No? Ang kanyang red line is, dapat firm tayo at dapat respetuhin nila yung ating sovereign rights, no? At yun nga para sa kanya, we won't give up on that nung tinanong sa kanyang issue ng arbitration. Basta firm ka. Yan ang sinabi ni Pacquiao. Yan ang dapat sagot. So, in fairness, in terms of semantics, I think I'll give him the highest score dun sa sagot sa West Philippine Sea. But in terms of course, policy and how, the issue is complicated and all, okay, you can say, depending on where you stand, some would say Lenny gave the best answer, some would say ISKO gave the best answer, or if you are someone who's skeptical of US or alliances and international law, you'll say BBM perhaps gave the best answer, diba? Although Senator Lacson is also closer a little bit to dun sa sagot ni ISKO, no? A little bit in the middle, no? But in fairness, with the exception of Bongbong Marcos, practically all other candidates had very firm stance sa West Philippine Sea. And Pacquiao had literally, he mentioned the word, dapat firm tayo dyan. Basta firm ka. Yun ang sinabi niya. No? In fairness sa kanya. Sorry kasi I translated some of them into English. So siguro may konting transliteration na nangyari dito. Pero yun nga they need to see na firm, that we're firm too. Parang, I think Tagalog niya sinabi na dapat makita nila na firm din tayo or something like that. But he used the word firm a lot. So, I like that. Hindi firm na kumpanya, yung firm na talagang fighter. Boom, 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 boom. Talagang Pacquiao, man. We're proud. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, dun tayo sa second issue na ni-raise niya, which actually is more or less the issue that colored his entire interview, and an issue that, that his entire campaign has been dyed in. And that is, dyed as in yung color, no? Hindi yung ano. At yun ang issue ng corruption. He keeps on going back to the issue of corruption. And in a way, actually, naalala ko si late President Pinoy, no? President Benigno Aquino, who always made the issue of good governance and corruption a central theme of his political campaign and his political legacy, no? So in this sense, in fairness, I see parallels more between Pacquiao and President Aquino than Pacquiao and President Duterte, even though Pacquiao was the president of the ruling party of where President Duterte belongs. So issue of corruption is very important to him. Although, of course, similar to our current president, I would say even the previous president, ang in-emphasize na yung issue ng political will. Now, let me go to this issue ng corruption because this is a much more complicated issue. Now, ito masasabihin ko corruption is a symptom. Yes, it's a cause of a lot of problems. It contributes to and it's correlated with poverty, inequality. Pero ang corruption po ay simptomas po ito ng isang mas malalim na problema. Kasi po kung maayos ang estado mo, kung meron kang rule of law, no? Kung meron kang mamamayan na mobilize against corruption at napakababa yung tolerance for corruption at the most fundamental daily life experience level, bababa po ang corruption. So, hindi natin pwedeng pag-usapan ang issue po ng corruption kung hindi natin pag-usapan kung yung institutional roots ng itong problem na ito. At diyan po babalik tayo sa issue ng rule of law. Dahil kung meron tayong accountability, kung wala pong impunity yung mga magnanakaw, yung mga corrupt, kung maayos po yung ating judicial institutions po, at kung ating kultura ay low tolerance for corruption and high appreciation for integrity and accountability and transparency, actually po yung corruption ay bababa. Magiging less of a problem yan. Tama naman sinabi ni BBM na yung issue ng corruption is a universal condition, that's true. But it's also a question of gravity. At alam natin, pag tinignan mo yung mga rankings ng Pilipinas sa yung mga corruption index rankings, ay medyo bumababa, no? in recent years, hindi po maganda yung ranking ng Philippines. So medyo lumalala yung problema in certain ways. Let me also emphasize this point, that corruption itself alone cannot explain long-term developmental trajectory. Bakit kamo? Actually, andito yung copy ng Francis Fukuyama kung kunin ko. Maganda yung book niyang ito kasi minention niya isa sa mga favorite thinkers ko, si Max Weber. Max Weber ay isang German sociologist who distinguished between different kinds and types of corruption. So, meron tayong isang corruption, sabi natin, meron ito sa mga bansang katulad ng, sabi natin, China, kung saan may corruption sa loob ng government, but yung pera na nako-corrupt, na reinvest po sa loob ng sarili nilang ekonomiya. Napupunta po ito sa mga pabrika. Napupunta po ito sa paggawa ng trabaho, no? Paggawa ng new economic engines. And then, meron tayong ibang klaseng corruption kung saan itong corruption po ay ninanakaw ng politiko at napupunta ito sa Swiss account nila. Napupunta po ito sa mga bongga-bongga party nila sa Mediterranean. Napupunta po ito sa mga Cayman Islands, mga ganito, di ba? Alam natin sino yung mga na yan, yung mga nasa Panama Papers, yung mga, alam ba yung mga may bagong papers pa, di ba? May Panama Papers at may bago pang lumabas. Yan po ang pinaka-destructive form of corruption kasi hindi siya constructive, creative, efficient corruption at all. I mean, not that corruption can be good in a sense, but actually, some economists will discuss the notion of efficient corruption. Now, I know na mas-stress kayo dyan, but it's more similar to what I said in the case of fast-growing countries like China. No? Kung saan may corruption nga, pero yung pera ay nagsisirculate internally, or, I mean, if corruption means irregularities in terms of allocation of budget and hindi siya tugma doon sa mga basic SOPs, pero yung circulation ng money, importante din saan pumupunta. So, minsan yung mga local government units sa China, may mga ginagawa silang kung ano-ano para mag-raise ng money, including doon sa mga land issues. But the money is raised and it's invested then doon sa mga provinces na yan. No? So, that's why nakikita natin na, yes, corruption is a bad problem. It's a big issue. It contributes to poverty and inequality. But certain kinds of corruption actually are not as destructive to long-term economic growth. In fact, kung titignan mo yung Malaysia, tignan mo yung Indonesia, tignan mo yung China, napakataas mo yung corruption rate sa mga bansa na yun. Tignan mo yung ranking sila. And yet, they have on average better growth rates than the Philippines. No? So, in a sense, if you look at it, yung corruption natin sa Pilipinas is more like yung sinabi ko kanina. Yung kinokorrupt, napupunta sa Swiss bank account, napupunta sa bunga-bunga party, napupunta sa 2,000 shoes, I don't know, Hermes, whatever. So, yun po. So, let's be very clear about this. And as I said, ang corruption po ay isang symptom ng more fundamental problem. Ito po yung lack of rule of law. And how do you ensure rule of law? You have to strengthen state institutions. You have to create a culture of accountability and transparency. Hindi po madali yan. So, yes, I agree with Senator Pacquiao na corruption is a big issue. But this is, I won't say scratching the surface, but I think this is just mid-level analysis. You're not hitting the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is lack of rule of law. So, dapat ang sagot mo dyan sa issue ng corruption is paano mo palakasin yung accountability and transparency sa ating state institutions. And also, more broadly, paano ka nagko-cultivate ng isang kultura kung saan ang bawat Pilipino po ay more and more appreciative of transparency and accountability at saka low tolerance for corruption. No? Not to mention, there are also other measures. For instance, in Singapore, medyo mataas yung salary ng mga government officials, especially yung high-level officials, but taas din yung requirements, taas din yung level of training, taas din yung performance, yung mga KPIs nila. So, I think the Singapore model could be helpful to us in that sense, no? Meritocratic, well-paid government positions, no? And then, of course, we also have to do something about certain departments na maraming corruption issues, and also we have to have targeted approach. So, let's say, kunyari, I'm not saying that's the case, let's say Bureau of Customs, for instance, etc. So, you have to have a targeted approach, and people you put in charge there, dapat alam nilang ginagawa nila. And as I said, we can look at best practices around the world to deal with this issue of corruption. So, in short, corruption, yes, is a problem, but sometimes it's kind of like a motherhood statement, parang catch-all phrase for to kind of parang mystify the general sets of problems that you're facing in our country. When in fact, dapat you scratch it further and tignan mo yung mas malalim na ugat ng problema sa ating bansa. Third, pinag-usapan ni Senator Pacquiao yung issue ng debt. And this is very interesting because his stance is actually iba dun sa sinabi ni Lenny, iba rin din sinabi ni ISKO at iba rin sinabi ni BBM. Because ang approach ni Pacquiao is, what you can call more microeconomic approach, no? Medyo firm theory level. Na sinasabi na sa bahay, ako in charge dun sa budget, no? Sa management, etc. And in fairness, nakita natin kay Senator Pacquiao, medyo gamay niya yung mga numbers. At nakita mo, si Tito Boy, medyo impressed siya. When sinabi ni Senator Pacquiao na ito po yung ginastos natin this year, pero ito lang yung budget natin sa government. So something like, I think 40% more yung gastos natin dun sa revenues na raise natin during the pandemic. So he was talking about the need for fiscal responsibility, and I think that was a good thing. Sabi niya nga, para sa kanya, our debt to GDP ratio, which is now close to 60%, para sa kanya nakakabala yan. Especially kung hindi ito napupunta sa tamang investments at napupunta ito sa corruption. Malaking chunk po ng ating budget ay napupunta sa corruption. Ito yung base sa mga statistics ng government mismo. But let me go to the fourth issue, which I think is very, very important. Yung war on drugs. At dito nakikita natin na halos lahat ng candidates, in one way or another, ay critical dun sa approach ni Pangulong Duterte sa issue ng droga. I would say that ISKO was probably the only candidate who was more openly praising of President Duterte on that point, although he clarified that, of course, his approach is going to be more in consonance with human rights, no? Dapat yung karapatan ng tao ng respetuhin mo. In fairness, ISKO has been clear with that in our interview with him, in his interview here. But in fairness kay Pacquiao, very strong siya dito sa issue na yan. At sinabi niya, yes, hindi tayo narco-state. Yun din ang sinabi ni BBM, yun din ang sinabi ni Lenny, yun din ang sinabi ni ISKO, hindi pa tayo narco-state. Yes, problema yan. At minention niya na nag-miscalculate si Duterte, no? At in fact, sinabi ni Pacquiao na kailangan ng body cam. Na kailangan ng body cam yung mga pulis para hindi magkakaroon na yung mga nanlaban situation and EJKs and all of that. So in fairness to Pacquiao, no, he is addressing those issues. But on the issue of abortion, including therapeutic abortion, more similar siya sa stance ni ISKO, I would say, than, let's say, definitely stance of PBM or even Lenny, no? Although, ang emphasis ni Pacquiao is on the issue of therapy for post-traumatic stress, no? Especially yung mga victims of rape, among other things. But he was very categorically conservative on this point in time. On this issue, even though Tito Boy really gave him a lot of chances to explain himself, look at different scenarios. The same way na binigyan ng chance si ISKO also on this issue. But both of them really held firm on that. And then ito interesting. Of course, there are other things we can discuss, but ito interesting. Sinabi niya na kaibigan niya. Marami siya mga billionaires na kaibigan. Interesting. Sa isang podcast ko sa Project Pilipinas, pinag-usapan namin na kasama ko si Mark Camboa na if ever, kung naging vice president si Pacquiao, if he didn't run for president, because we always felt, I'll stand by it, and I always felt it's better for him to run for vice president first for a number of reasons. You can guess which reasons, but a number of reasons. But yung isang sinabi namin is yung mga contacts niya pwede leverage. Kasi syempre global celebrity si Pacquiao and he has made many friends, important big people, you know, during his fights in Las Vegas, during his fights around the world. So he's a known commodity among the biggest names in the world, no? Pero ang parang minention lang niya sa dulo, si Jack Ma lang yata yung minention niya. Although he was, na-clarify na si Jack Ma yung naka-invest na dito. But we're gonna get just more investment from Jack Ma or something like that. Parang yun yung sinabi niya. But sana, I mean, si Elon Musk ba, friend mo? Or si Bezos? Or ano? Yun lang. And sana, alam mo, ito advice ko this is my humble advice naman sa Pacquiao camp. I gave advice already to other camps in my previous talks. Hindi tayo perfect. It's just a constructive advice. You can ignore it. You can just whatever. It's up to you. Pero ito lang sasabihin ko. Ang isang advice ko dyan is, I think Pacquiao can emphasize that point more. Nasasabihin niya, because kilala ako personally, and they know that I'm not corrupt, and I'm against corruption, and I have good intention for the country. At nakita natin si Pacquiao, napaluha siya when he talk about poverty, when he talk about his concern, his pulsating, conscientious love for the country and his sense of purpose to save the country. Parang pwede na sabihin na precisely because of those personal attributes, precisely because alam nila na sincere akong tao, at precisely because alam nila maglalagay ako ng pinakamagagaling na tao sa gobyerno, no? I'll have the best cabinet members, I'll have the right people, and I'm gonna have zero tolerance for corruption. Mag-i-invest talaga ng big time itong mga investors na to, mga billionaires na to. Hindi lang si Jack Ma, si Jack Ma nga medyo may di ba, medyo na siya sa China recently dahil na-criticize ng government. But you know, yung mga ibang upward upwardly mobile billionaires, if I could use that term, no, which is majority of them. But a lot of Chinese billionaires were on the downward trajectory over the past year or so because they ran afoul with the regulators for some of the comments they made. But anyways, let's not go too much into China. Yun nga, sana, yun ang mention niya. I think that if Pacquiao makes it that way, I think that argument could make more sense. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, have more impact, no? Kung sasabihin niya, precisely because they know me personally, they know my stance on corruption, and they know that I'm gonna bring the best and brightest to the government, I'm sure they're willing to invest in our country. Hindi lang just any investment, but cutting-edge investments. We're talking about fintech. We're talking about electric cars, batteries, EVs. We're talking about cutting-edge research and development investments. Dapat ganun. So yun ang libreng advice ko, constructive advice ko dun sa Pacquiao team. If you want to make that argument, you have to show ano ang unique sa'yo that will really bring more billionaires and more high-end investments. Hindi lang makikilala akong billionaire. Because I'm sure the other camps, meron din silang kilalang billionaire, right? Marami naman my friends na billionaires siguro dyan, di ba? Diba? So yun lang. Of course, we can go on the other points that he raised, and in fairness naman kay Senator Pacquiao, he was very honest about yung kanyang kasaysayan, personal history in terms of drugs. But that he, because of his faith, because of his love for life, for his country, and his faith in himself, at yung pananampalataya, eventually was able to overcome yung temptations of falling into that trap, no? Yung trap of youth delinquency and crime and drugs and all of that. So, God bless you, Senator Pacquiao, for being honest and forthcoming and giving a very inspirational, commentaries based on your life experience on that. Now, medyo gusto kong pumunta sa issue ng COMELEC, to be honest. Pero parang unfair naman kay Senator Pacquiao kasi yung ibang candidates naman binigyan natin ng full attention sa kanya at pag pumunta naman tayo dito sa COMELEC kagad, maging ibang meta na yan, so baka medyo mag-spread medyo ma-distract tayo sa discussion. To be honest, I'm still trying to follow up, with yung mga latest na mga away na nangyari dyan sa COMELEC, yung mga back and forth between different commissioners, may mga nagte-trending dyan, at natin si Commissioner Guanzon is about to retire soon, so I think she's all guns blazing, and probably she feels she has to give it all, no, at no holds bar. So mukhang we're gonna have more pasabog siguro on bakit ang tagal nung release ng Division 1 resolution dun sa disqualification cases, why she believes dapat na disqualified yung isang kandidato. And of course, we have to also discuss this kasi yung issue na this potentially can still go to the Supreme Court. So we're gonna have actually legal experts, election experts, election law experts to discuss this soon. So we're gonna have someone